We're planning a retrospective series of videos on my channel for a little while now, and I'd first like to start with Katharine Kerr's Deverry series. To clarify, I just mean the first four novels and not the continued acts that come after it. This is the first of at least one more, that being Shadows of the Apt. But I'm Chris, and here we go. I'm really terrible at pronunciation, and while there is a pronunciation guide at the back of these novels, I'm still terrible. So if I say something wrong within this video, I am sorry. I'm just bad. I think if I would have heard some of the names and terms spoken aloud, it would help me. But I never felt the urge to pick it up. One of my old favourites, Kate Elliott, who wrote the Crossroads series here, she often talked about this series on her blog. And I remember looking it up, say, 16 years ago, and seeing what it was about and thinking, I don't think the series is for me. And I don't know if I'd read Deverry back then, if I'd feel the same that I do now, but I think just dismissing it was a bit of a mistake. I remember reading like that it takes place in present sequences and also shifts back to like past sequences, and I've never been the biggest enjoyer of scenes that take place further back in a fantasy series' timeline. Potentially because I really love Malazan, that maybe my tastes and perspective has changed over the years, which is a good thing, because picking up Deverry now, when I'm a bit older, has been hugely impactful and a very wonderful reading experience. So, and I wanted to get to this retrospective because I recently, as of 2 to 3 nights ago, finished A Time of Exile. And A Time of Omens here, I'm going to be picking up next month. So I really wanted to do this before I got further into the series, further muddling my view of the first 4 novels, because something I learned within A Time of Exile is just how deep the history goes and how it all connects and weaves together. And I think it's really fascinating. I'll give a quick rundown about how we're introduced to Deverry in Daggerspell. Well, we start off with a bit of a sequence where we're met with this character named Nevin, whose name means no one. And we quickly learn a bit of his history as we're shot straight back to when he was a young man and he was the son of a ruler. And we follow him for a little while, and we learn the tragedies of his past and his decisions, and what leads him to making this vow, which is really powerful, and it impacts not only his life, but the future incarnations of other characters. Because something we're taught very early on in this series is that each person will be reborn. They won't have the memories of who they once were, but their I guess I'm not really sure about the terminology here, but their, I guess, soul comes back, and because of this vow, these characters are often drawn back together. This, and we see later on in the first book, we see Nevin experiencing another piece of time where the characters have found each other again, they're drawn to each other again, and further tragedies unfold. Because Nevin's vow is to bring the person that he loved to the Duoma, which is the, I guess, magic wizardry force that is in the world. And because of his decisions initially, when he was a young man, she could not. She could not be a part of that life. And so the series is about him trying to fix his problems. But that doesn't mean he like can be heavy-handed or anything. He's got to be more of an advisor and share his wisdom as opposed to be this direct influence. So we skip backwards and forwards between the past and the present timelines, and this is where in the past I was like, this story is probably not going to be for me. But I quickly learnt in the first novel that I loved the past sequences. They were so good every single time. And I'd almost forget about the main narrative because these past sequences were that good and they were that intriguing. They would always drag me in, and I could not stop reading those sections. But if we switch to like the main narrative, I guess, or present narrative, or however you want to say it, we follow Jill, Rodri, Cullen, and you know, a whole bunch of these other minor characters which make up the cast of, say, the first novel. The second novel is a bit different, and we follow like their introductions to each other, about who they are. I think the first novel is a really good point to see if you might like the series, because you get a lot of what the other novels make up. You get like a bit of history, you get a bit of the modern events, you get a bit of the magic, you get a bit of the lore. You learn about quite a lot, and it really does a great job of explaining what the series is going to be about. So if you really want to check out the series, I think Daggerspell is a really solid entry. The magic in this series is not flashy. You're not going to have these big, epic mage fireball battles. It's a lot more subtle. There's a lot more scrying, astral projection. Characters can turn into or shapeshift into animals, and it's less direct than perhaps a lot of other fantasy currently out there. And it's something that I really enjoy about the series. It may not be for you, but it doesn't all. It's not all good. As the Deverry series goes on, we learn more about the dark side of the magic. I don't want to perhaps go into too much detail here because it would be spoilers. But the second novel the present sequence in the second novel probably gives a lot more in that regard than Daggerspell. Darkspell, this is probably my least favourite of the first four novels. I think the present sequences are. I don't particularly like. I wasn't particularly as engaged with the present sequence in this one. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, this one here gives a lot more into the dark side of the Duomo than I think the first book did. Again, it's been quite a while since I read Daggerspell. Uh, the other three novels I read earlier this year, and they immediately made me want to pick up A Time of Exile and The Westlands and look further deeper into the series, because I feel like this series has the potential to become one of my all-time favorites. I did sort of bemoan a bit of the modern timeline. I guess that's what I'm calling it right now. I don't know what else to call it. But the past sequences within this novel are fantastic. I don't recall how many there are in here, but they are always my favorite parts. Like even the book I just read, A Time of Exile, like the past sequences were all amazing. I might talk about both Dragonspell and Dawnspell together, because I feel like the first two novels kind of have a bit more of a standalone type feel to the main narrative, whereas these two here, they follow back to back quite a fair bit more. The first novel and second novel sort of focus on some of our main cast together, whereas these two start to separate them a bit more, and we see them in different situations without each other, and we see we see how, like, what they're capable of, their strengths, and sort of more of who they are. These two books share a bit of sexual misconduct, one through assault, and the other through position of power misbalance. Hey, editor me here. I don't feel like what I recorded came across how I wanted it to. So I just want to say that I think these novels are a bit more nuanced than a lot of fantasy novels out there. And they don't really come across to me as like using the assaults as like shock value or anything like that. And I think there's actual character development through the actions. So I think Katharine Kerr approaches it a bit better than most. That's all I wanted to say. But the characters within these novels typically have like a weird, which is, I'm not sure if it's a destiny or of that nature, but it's definitely like something they're tied to. And say, like earlier I explained Nevin and like the reincarnation of the people that he knew. Like his weird is tied to his former love and her coming to the Duomo. I don't really know if that's my favorite part of the series, but I think it's perfectly fine, and it definitely fits within the world. I've talked about a lot of what I want to talk about, and I'm not sure if there's too many spoilers within this video, but this next section's probably a little bit too much if you haven't read the series, so I recommend maybe not watching this part. I don't often find that most series end particularly well. I think typically they're fine. I just don't really love how most series end. Quite often we're like the final X is defeated or the final thing is done, and then then there might be a small epilogue and the series is done or something like that. But Dragonspell goes on for quite a while, and we get to the end and a character has to make a choice, but no matter which choice she makes, it's going to hurt someone. Her having to make that choice rather than like coming back to the next series and she's like made a choice or something like that, it's just really powerful. I guess I've been a bit all over the shop with this in this video. I haven't really written anything down, which is maybe a bit of a mistake. And I really wanted to get to this video before moving further into the series, because I just know that the further in I get, the more tangled my thoughts are, and maybe did X happen in this book or did X happen in that book. I think this series is well worth a read, and potentially it's going to become, once I read further, a favourite of mine. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm Chris. I will be back next week with just a bit of a reading update from what I've finished off in July. But yeah, thank you. Bye.